You can use the GIF file format for images that have a small or fixed numbers of colors. GIF files are always reduced to contain no more than 256 unique colors. The compression algorithm for GIF files is less complex than that for JPEG files, but when you use it on flat color images and text, it produces very small file size. The GIF file format is generally not suitable for photographic images or images with gradient colors. Because the GIF format has limited numbers of colors, gradients in photographs will end up banding and pixelation is going to occur. Let's look at some images that we can save as a GIF. I'm going to open my Save for the Web dialog box, and I'm using the keyboard shortcut. On the Mac, it's Command-Option-Shift-S. On the PC, it's Control-Alt-Shift-S. I'm going to select the first pane and convert it from JPEG to GIF, and you can see that Photoshop is going to determine how many colors it thinks it needs to represent this particular item. Now, if you look at this image, you may think that it really only contains 4 colors, and yes, that is true. But if we zoom in on the image, and I'll use the magnifying glass tool to zoom in, you can see that the edges of the image, even though they're just one color, when we get to the curved edges, it's actually multiple shades of that particular color. So in turn, when we're using the GIF image format, we're going to need to select, in general, especially if you're using a circular shape or something with a curve, you're going to need to use more than just the colors that you see. You can, however, reduce the number of colors down considerably. I'll come to this bottom pane and choose to optimize this as a GIF as well. And here, we'll experiment with some of the different settings. The way in which you can reduce the colors is to change the color slider. So we can change it from 64, which is what it's showing now, and we can reduce it anywhere from 256 all the way down to 2. If I bring it down to 2, you can see that it's going to pick the primary color that's used in the artwork and then render it accordingly. This obviously changes the artwork considerably, but it does reduce the file size quite a bit. Let's look at how we can augment some of the algorithms that GIF uses to reduce the file size. I'll leave this one set at 2, and we can experiment with some of these different settings so that I can show you what happens. We have a color reduction method which contains these different settings. Currently, this is set to selective. Selective is going to create a color table similar to the perceptual color table, but it's going to favor broad areas of color and also try to preserve the web-based colors. This is going to usually produce images with the greatest color integrity. This is the default option. If we switch to perceptual, you can see that the color base changes considerably. This is going to create a custom color table by giving priority to colors for which the human eye has greater sensitivity. The next setting we have is the adaptive setting. Adaptive is going to create a custom color table by sampling colors from the predominant spectrum in the image. If we're using an image that only has teal and orange colors, it's going to produce a color table that's made primarily of teals and oranges. Most images concentrate colors in a particular area of the spectrum. This is probably a little bit easier to see if we increase the number of colors slightly. So here I've changed the colors to 4, and you can see the color table that it's producing. If I switch this back to perceptual, the colors are going to be similar, but they'll change slightly. And then here's the selective palette. The restrictive palette is going to use the standard 216 colors that are common to both Windows and Mac operating systems. This is going to ensure that a browser dither is going to be applied to colors when the image is displayed using 8-bit color. This is also referred to as the web-safe palette. Using the web-safe palette can sometimes create larger files, and it's recommended only when you want to avoid browser dithering, and that is a high priority. You can always tell a web-safe color because a little diamond is going to appear in the color. It will actually resample the colors from your images and get the closest web-safe equivalent. You can use the custom setting, which will allow you to use a color palette that is created or modified by the user. This works if you open an existing GIF or Ping8 file that has a custom color palette. And then you have options to create black and white or grayscale versions of the image. And obviously they are going to reduce the colors down and make a version of your logo with the limited color palette. We also have the Mac OS and the Windows OS, and you can see that the colors are going to change slightly depending on the operating system. I'm going to set this setting back to selective. Now, at 4 colors, selective isn't a great option, but if I increase this to say 16, I get a rendering that is more close to my original. You can see that the file size is much smaller than the version that uses 64 colors, but it is only about 2.5K smaller, so it's not a huge difference, but it is significant in the overall scheme of things. The next option that we have is where we can specify the dithering algorithm. Dithering refers to the method of simulating colors that aren't available in the color display system that you're currently using. A higher dithering percentage creates the appearance of more colors and more detail in an image. It can increase the file size. Let me open a different image so I can better show you diffusion. I'm going to hit cancel here, and I'm going to go to one of the bitmap images. We'll open the Save for the Web dialog box, and this time I'm going to choose GIF, just so we can see what's going to happen. As you can see, I'm using a GIF with a selective color palette, and I'm using 4 colors. It's reducing the number of colors down considerably. Sometimes this can create a desirable effect, but obviously it's not the same as having photorealistic imagery. If we did increase the number of colors considerably, we could get something that would more closely mimic the original. This actually isn't too bad of a rendering of the pineapples. You can see though on some of the leaves that here it's a smoother transition. Here we simply have more variations in the tones on the leaves. And even though this isn't a bad representation, look at my file size. If this was saved as even a high quality JPEG, the file size is still much smaller than its GIF counterpart. And obviously the quality is not nearly as good as what we would get with JPEG on the image. Sometimes though, you may need to use a GIF because you're creating animation, or you may want to just try reducing the number of colors down for effect. I'm going to reduce this image down so that it's using a GIF with 32 colors. Let's see what happens when we adjust the dithering. I'm going to switch this to no dither, and let's set this preview below to the same settings. So once again, we'll use 32 colors, and we're going to set it to be a selective GIF. This one is set to no dither. This one currently is set to diffusion, but the dither is set down to 0%. If I increase this to 100%, you can see that I get much different results. I'm going to get more of a pixelated result. It's almost like the old masters when they would paint in the impressionistic style. When you add diffusion to your image, it's going to apply a random pattern that is usually less noticeable than the dither setting that is associated with pattern or noise. If we zoom out a little bit on our image, you can see the results of what we get compared to no dither and then 100% dither. It's just a different way of rendering out the image. Let's go ahead and select this pane, and we'll set this to GIF with 32 colors. We'll go ahead and set the diffusion setting to pattern. And you can see that again, the algorithm that it's writing is slightly different. Pattern is going to apply a more halftone-like square pattern to simulate any colors that are not within the color table. The final option that we have available here is the noise option. And noise is going to apply a random pattern similar to the diffusion dither method, but without diffusing the pattern across adjacent pixels. No seams are going to appear with the noise dither method. So these are all different options, and depending on what the art is and the effect that you're looking for, you might find that these are a good way to reduce the file size. Notice the difference between no dither, the file size is 151K, using 100% dither, now I have 177K, or this pane over here, which is using the noise option. Make sure that you compare and contrast and find an option that's going to work best for you. I'll go ahead and hit cancel. I want to show you some other things that you can do with GIF. I'm going to hide the background layer so that I can see my pineapple that's on a transparent background. We'll open the Save for the Web dialog box, and let's just reduce the physical percent down on our image so that we can see more of the pineapple. If I choose GIF, one of the options that I have is to choose transparency, and you can see that the white background is now knocked out. It's showing with the checkerboard background. This indicates transparency. This does a pretty good job of knocking out the background, and obviously you can go ahead and experiment with the different sorts of diffusion settings that you would more likely use, and all of them work with transparency. We have no transparency dither, we have diffusion transparency dither, we have pattern transparency dither, and we have noise transparency dither. This is going to be hard for me to show you on the image as is. Let me add a drop shadow so that you can see a little bit more what's happening. I'm going to select this layer and just add a quick drop shadow. Now the pineapple has a drop shadow. Let's go back into our Save for the Web dialog box, and let's choose GIF as the file format. I'll do the same thing to the preview that exists below. So right now, the top one is using the selective color palette, and I have it set to no dither. I'm going to set the transparency to a no transparency dither. When I do this, you can see what occurs. It's going to actually make a solid color background that appears behind the somewhat transparent pixels. If we zoom in, it'll be easier for you to see. Here in the original, you can see that the area where the drop shadow exists is partially transparent. It's not opaque, nor is it fully transparent. When we save the image as a GIF, it only supports either 100% transparent or 100% opaque. So what it does here is it goes ahead and it tries to create the drop shadow and represent the varying shades of gray that it needs to create the drop shadow, but then it's going to put a white color, and the white color exists from the matte. You'll want to pick a matte color that is going to best match the background color that this would be sitting on. Let's say this was sitting on a blue background. I would pick the blue background color, and now you can see that my halo, if you will, is going to appear with a blue shade instead of a white shade. So these different settings, the noise transparency, the pattern transparency, and the diffusion transparency, are just going to change the way in which the little patterns are going to be rendered on the image where the transparent occur. I find that when using the GIF file format, it's best to not have these gradiated tones of pixels. It's best to have an image that just exists with opaque areas and transparent areas. If we go back into the Save for the Web dialog box and choose our GIF file format, you can see that here is my pineapple image. Now the matte color is set to white. If I set it to something that you can see a little bit easier, I'll pick a bright purple. You can see that there's a slight purple or pink halo around the image. That's a result of the matte color. So it's very important to go ahead and pick a color that is going to best blend with the background that you want to place your image on. Otherwise, you'll have like a stroke or a dithered pixels that are going to appear with the color that you choose for the matte. The other option that we have is interlaced. Interlaced is going to display a low resolution version of the image in the browser while the full image file is downloading. Interlacing can make the download time seem shorter and can assure the viewer that something is happening. It does increase the file size. So if I was using this file, which is 33 kilobytes, and I chose interlaced, it's going to bring it up to 34 kilobytes. I generally try to turn interlacing on because I think the small amount of file size is usually worth it. The Web Snap option specifies a tolerance level for shifting colors to the closest web-safe equivalent. If we increase this, these colors will snap to their web-safe equivalents, and you can see that the web-safe colors are going to appear with the diamond in the middle. A higher value is going to shift more of your colors. A lower value will keep the colors closer to the original. Generally, GIF file format is best used for images that contain reduced numbers of colors. They're more line art and they're not photographic in nature. Here I have an image of a pineapple. If I switch this to the GIF file format, and we'll just uncheck transparency for right now, you can see that the file size is fairly small, 7.5 kilobytes. The image looks great. It's currently using 32 colors. I may be able to reduce the colors down even farther without losing any sort of detail. 16 looks good. Let's try 8. Even 4 on this image might look pretty good. I probably need at least 4 colors though, because if I go down to 2, I might get a little chunkiness. You can see how the details and the edges of the shapes are not quite as smooth. So 4 and 8 are going to give me pretty good results, and my file size is going to stay much smaller. I also have the option of rendering this out on the transparent background, as long as I don't mind having the matte color be applied to the image. So in a nutshell, you're going to use GIFs for simple images that only have a few colors. They work great for line art type drawings, logos, and generally non-photographic images, unless you want to try to achieve some sort of more artistic effect with an image where you want to reduce the number of colors down.